Welcome, everyone. This session is called Because They're Kids. It is going to be a monthly virtual education session hosted by Lehigh Valley Reilly Children's Hospital. And they will be focusing on topics that are relevant to our community and the health of our community's children. You will have an opportunity to ask questions throughout this session. You can do so in the question and answer box. And my name is Helen. I'll be helping to facilitate this evening session. So tonight we're going to be discussing some summer safety topics. Now that it is full on summer and the heat is here, we want to know how to keep everyone safe. So just to get started, I'll go over some general housekeeping. All of the participants have been muted upon entry with your video cameras off. This just helps us eliminate some feedback and distractions throughout the program. We're also recording the session so that others may watch at a later date. And for privacy purposes, we have all questions and answers will be anonymous. That said, we absolutely want you to participate. So please post your questions to our panelists using the Q&A tool. And you can find that at the bottom of your screen. And then at the end, if we run out of time to answer all of the questions, we will follow up with the participants today using the email addresses that you've registered with. So that we will eventually answer your questions and apologize for the fact that we ran out of time. But hopefully that will not happen today. So Chris Rooney, I will hand it off to you to get us started with the slides.
Fantastic. And just confirming everyone is able to see the slides that I've shared. Thumbs up. Perfect. All right. So it looks like we are kicking off with Dr. Carter. So Dr. Carter, if you wanted to introduce yourself, and I'll advance the slides then on cue.
Great, thank you. So welcome everyone to our webinar tonight. My name is Dr. Deb Carter. I'm a pediatrician with Lehigh Valley Physician Group Pediatrics, and I practice out of Trexlertown. And I also am the Executive Vice Chair for the Department of Pediatrics at Lehigh Valley Reilly Children's Hospital. So we're happy to have you here. I know that summer is going by quickly, but we are still in the midst of the heat and the bugs and the sunshine and lots of pool time. So we wanted to just make sure we get some safety tips out to the community. These are also, of course, relevant for anyone who takes a little winter break at a beach somewhere. So we hope that you learned something helpful, and we're happy to answer questions, as Helen said, in the Q&A box at the end. So first, I'm going to talk to you about sunscreen and sun safety. I think there's some misinformation out there sometimes about how to take care, particularly of infants under 6 months of age, and can they wear sunscreen. So we do recommend that you keep infants that are young infants under 6 months of age outside, protected in the sun so that they're out of direct sunlight whenever possible. However, it is safe to put some sunscreen on them, and I'll talk about that in a minute or two. We should always try to dress our kids in lightweight clothing with a tight weave that does block the sun rays that can cause sunburn, and that covers most of the body, obviously without causing them to have any overheating. They should wear a hat, especially to protect the face, the ears, and the back of the neck, and do your best to limit exposure during the times when the UV radiation is the highest risk, which is 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. So yeah, realize that's the whole day, which is why we're talking about sunscreen. We also recommend wearing sunglasses that provide 99% UV protection, because our eyes are also at risk for being damaged by sun rays. And then, every area of your skin that is exposed should have some sunscreen on it to protect it whenever you're outside.
And Dr. Carter, I'll apologize. It does seem like the slides want to self-advance, but I think I've figured out how to stop that from happening. So I will do my best to not have that happen.
Okay, no problem. All right, so when you choose sunscreen, there's lots of different options out there, and sometimes it can be a little bit confusing as to which one is the best choice. I would recommend looking for one that's labeled broad spectrum, which then allows for protection against both UVA and UVB radiation, which are both can be damaging to the skin. We recommend using an SPF of at least 15 for daily use and 30 for prolonged outdoor exposure. There isn't a lot of evidence that the really high SPF numbers like 100 or even 50 do much more than what a 30 can do for you. So I would look for something between an SPF of 30 and 50, and you should be protected really well with that. For sensitive areas like the nose, the cheeks, the ears, the top of the shoulders that get the highest exposure, using a product that has zinc oxide or titanium dioxide can be helpful because that's a little bit more of a barrier protectant and may prevent some of those areas from getting the high exposure that they normally get. All right. So for the infants under 6 months of age, again, if they don't have adequate shade and clothing, you can use a limited amount of sunscreen in small areas. You can look at the areas that are really the most exposed, and you may not be able to protect, like the lower half of the arms, the lower half of the legs, and just use sunscreen on those areas. We typically recommend trying a test patch on young kids before you put the sunscreen on a larger part of their body, just to be sure that they don't react. So ideally, you would do that a few days ahead of time, and you could just make sure that a little area, maybe a quarter size on their back or their belly, doesn't have a reaction related to the sunscreen. For infants over 6 months of age and older kids, you can apply sunscreen to all areas of the body. Just be careful around the eyes and the mouth so they don't rub it in their eyes or get it into their mouth. But pretty much anywhere else in the body is safe and should be covered. All right, so how do we actually do the application of sunscreen? So certainly for younger kids and even for school-age kids, you want to make sure that you're doing the application yourself for those younger kids, and then for the older ones, just observing and making sure that they're doing it appropriately. It's very easy to miss spots. I'm sure you've seen folks walking along the beach with large red stripes and such in places that they had missed their sunscreen. So just be careful to be sure that your kid's skin is fully covered. Be generous with it. Use enough that you can apply to all of the exposed areas. The backs of the knees, the tops of the feet, often get missed and can end up getting sunburned. Rub it in well. Kids don't like to walk around with the white residue on them anyway, but it also helps to protect them if you're rubbing it in. And if you can apply it 15 to 30 minutes before going outdoors, that's best. If you can't, obviously still apply it as soon as you get outdoors, and you can get that sunscreen on them, but it works a little bit. It takes a little bit of time to fully have its effect. So half an hour beforehand is a great goal. Continue to use it on cloudy days because we do see sunburns related to cloudy days. The UV rays still get through those clouds and can cause burns unexpectedly. Also be especially careful of places where the sun may be reflected. So off of sand, water, snow, and concrete. Make sure you're protecting yourself in those times as well. So this, when you're going skiing, the snow can actually reflect the sun quite a bit, and people often unexpectedly get sunburn on their face because the rest of their skin is typically covered, but the face may end up getting really pretty significantly burned. You should reapply your sunscreen after about 2 hours. And anytime that you get wet with swimming or sweating or drying off with a towel and rubbing off some of that sunscreen. So just keep reapplying it. Next, I'm just going to give a couple of tips on when should you call us when your child gets sunburn. So if it's in an infant under a year of age, we do recommend calling the office, checking in with us to just let us know the extent of it, and then we can determine whether or not a visit is indicated for that. For older kids, if they have blisters, if they have significant pain from it, or certainly if they have fever related to sunburn, we would like to see them for that. And then for milder sunburn, you can just do home care. Keep them hydrated, give them lots of water. You can use cool water on the skin to help soothe it. And if it's significantly discomfort or uncomfortable for them, you can use either acetaminophen, Tylenol products, or ibuprofen for kids who are 6 months or older. All right, I'm going to switch gears a little bit to those creepy critters and all the bugs that are outside and just talk about a few ways to protect yourself against bug bites. So first of all, just some things you can avoid to help eliminate the risk of bugs being close to you or close to your home is to avoid things like scented soaps and perfumes on your own skin when you're going outdoors, because those things, those sort of sweet smelling things will attract some of the bugs. If you have stagnant water, uncovered food, lots of flowery gardens, things like that, try to avoid those areas or even eliminate those stagnant water areas in your yard. Don't have buckets of water sitting around or, pools that kids were in the day before that you don't need that day. Just dump those things out, and that will help to keep the bugs away. Brightly colored clothing can also attract a lot of the flying insects. So you want to keep those, your clothes a little bit more dull colors during the times you're going to be outside. And then wearing long pants, long sleeve shirts, and socks can be really helpful to avoid mosquito bites. If you're in the woods or high grasses where we tend to have a lot more ticks, just wear, again, long sleeves, long pants, and then also hats to protect against ticks. And you also can use insect repellent to protect against insects that bite, so things like mosquitoes, ticks, and fleas. And I'll go through in a little bit more detail how to pick a bug spray. So there's lots of different bug sprays out there as well. It's really best to avoid the combination products that have both a sunscreen and an insect repellent in it, because we typically recommend applying sunscreen every couple of hours and insect repellent really only typically once before you go outdoors in a given day. Bug spray with DEET is the ingredient, is the most commonly found and is also one of the most effective ones. It is safe for kids to use and adults to use as well, and tends to be more effective than some of the natural ingredient ones like citronella or peppermint that may not actually really have any helpful impact. Picaridin is also approved and effective. It seems to be a shorter duration of protection, but sometimes you'll see a product without it as well. For the actual DEET products, there's a range of percents available out in the various community stores. So for infants and children 2 months and older, the American Academy of Pediatrics and the Center for Disease Control both recommend somewhere between a 10 and 30% DEET product. The percentage actually just helps determine the length of protection. So the recommendation is to use the lowest percent that provides the needed length of protection, so how long you're going to be outside. So a 10% will protect for about 2 hours. If you're going to be outside longer during the day, you would want to use the higher percent, like the 30%, which will protect for about 5 hours. So how do we do this? How do we apply the bug spray in a safe manner? So first of all, try to use lotions or the sticks that you can roll onto your skin, or the unpressurized sprays. The ones that have the pressure, like the cans in them, have a higher risk of being inhaled, especially by children who may not move out of the way when that spray is being released. You can apply it on the outside of your clothing and also on exposed skin. We don't recommend applying it under the clothing. It's not going to be as helpful, and it's going to be a higher exposure to the chemical getting absorbed. And also just be careful around kids' hands. You don't want them to get it all over their hands and then put their hands in their mouth. You want to use just enough to cover the clothing and the exposed skin. And again, apply typically just once per day, unless you're going to be outside for an extended period of time. And, for just like sunscreen for the younger children, you want to apply it for them. And for the older children, supervise the application of it. When you return indoors, just wash off any of the bug spray that was on the skin, just with soap and water, and make sure you wash the clothing before wearing that again. And then, of course, in our state, we have a lot of ticks that can carry Lyme disease, so we do recommend checking kids for ticks after they've been outside playing, and just sort of doing a head-to-toe check, from their hair to their toes to make sure you don't find any ticks on them. All right. The one last thing I wanted to just mention is we do have something available for our families and community called the Peds Partner app. It's a phone app that you can just download from the Apple Store. And it's a really great app that gives you a lot of parenting information that is really, evidence-based, and something that we feel provides accurate information, rather than trying to do some sort of a random search on the computer yourself. So there's a symptom checker on there that will help you if your child has a fever or a cough or a rash. It'll give you information to go through and help you decide if there's some home care that you can do for your child, or if you may need to call the office or even take them to the emergency room or an urgent care center. There's first aid advice in there. There's some information on CPR and choking that you can use. There's some medication dosing guidelines for some of the more common medications we use, like acetaminophen or ibuprofen. It links you to the Find a Doctor application for Lehigh Valley, so you can look in there to find physicians. And it also gives just some general parenting advice on behavior topics and other, baby topics and things you might need some help with. So we hope that you'll download it and give us feedback if there's things that we can improve on that. But we've had a lot of families use it and find that it's very helpful. All right, so just a few references you can look at for some additional information on sun safety. And then I think I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Rooney. Chris, you're muted.
Thank you. So apologies for a little bit of the slide jumping. I think that's just inherent to the slide set right now, but hopefully it wasn't too distracting, and we'll try to control it as we continue along. So my name's Chris Rooney. I am with the Division of Pediatric Hospital Medicine. So we are pediatricians that practice exclusively in the hospital and take care of children that have needed to be admitted to the hospital. And then my other role is as vice chair of education, so educating future pediatricians as they are residents here at the hospital. So the topic that I was asked to talk about is heat stress in active children, which is near and dear to my heart because I have some very active children of my own. And for sure, you know, we certainly see a lot of kiddos out there in the community practicing their sports or exercising or even just enjoying time outside at playgrounds. So it is important to know what is that safe balance between being active and getting a lot of healthy exercise, and when does it sort of cross the line in the dog days of summer. So that's what we're going to be going over in this portion of the talk. So first, I think it's probably just important to kind of try to understand what it's meant by heat stress. So any degree of extreme heat, which by the way is absolutely increasing in a lot of regions of the United States. Let's go back. Due to climate change, you know, just already today we see, you know, sort of this haze in our skyline that's due to the wildfires in the western parts of the United States. So we do know that this is a real thing. We know that high temperatures can cause children to experience heat stress. And that heat stress can manifest itself or show itself in a variety of ways. So anything from basic sunburn that Dr. Carter just talked about to the next step would be sort of some dehydration or not having enough fluids, not taking enough in. Heat exhaustion, which can be seen in children manifested with clammy skin, some dizziness, some cramping. Heat cramps are, you know, when you have heavy sweating and then your muscles have a lot of pain or spasms. And then heat stroke is even more severe than, you know, everything I've mentioned thus far. And that's when the skin sort of actually starts to be more dry and there's symptoms like headaches or confusion or passing out. And then not to underrepresent the psychological effects that can also be associated with heat stress, children can become fairly anxious or restless if they're uncomfortable in the heat of the day. So all of those things would fall under the more large umbrella term of heat stress. And these are all of the things that we're obviously trying to prevent as children go about their activities in the summer. So how hot is extreme? So to first just make the point, when the weather does not pose a risk, we absolutely still very much encourage children to play outdoors and often. That is by far, you know, great for their health and well-being. But what is too hot? So generally speaking, a heat index at or above 90 degrees suggests that there may be a health risk associated and there's a need for precautions. So again, that's not to say you can't go outdoors or be active, but the following precautions would be in general recommended. So for those that may not have access to air conditioning in their homes or at all, if there is a heat index of 90 degrees or higher, there is the recommendation that at least at some points throughout the day, you know, individuals, children and adults, find an air-conditioned space when possible. And some nice public places that are available would include community stores or public libraries that, you know, are, you know, able to accommodate the public for short periods of time and allow them to get access to some air conditioning. Staying hydrated, drinking enough is extremely important during high temperatures. Dressing lightly, not too many layers. Planning for extra rest time, depending on what you're doing. And then, you know, being able to cool off with either a mist or a swimming pool, a shower, or a cool bath. Preventing excessive sun exposure. And then, you know, this is unrelated to activity per se, but just to make sure that we take every opportunity to remind everyone, never, ever, ever leave children in a car or a closed motor vehicle, truly ever, but specifically related to heat stress. Cars can heat up dramatically and much, much faster than anyone would ever anticipate. So even a few minutes that seems like it wouldn't be a big deal can be a huge, huge risk. So never leaving kiddos in cars is important. So how to keep children safe when exercising? That's really what we were sort of talking about in terms of active children. So this is something that I've been pleased to see, at least in some of the situations that I've been involved in with my family, that coaches and trainers do seem to be getting this message and taking these precautions when children are participating in at least organized sports. But this applies to organized sports as well as casual exercise or activity. So the intensity of the activities that are lasting any more than 15 minutes should really be reduced in situations where heat stress is a concern. If a child is in a new program or a new geographic location, the recommendation is that they start slow and then gradually increase over the next 7 to 14 days. That gives their body an opportunity to acclimate to either this new activity level or this new geographic location and heat index. They should drink freely before activities. This is probably one of the things I think is probably under-recognized, is the importance to enter into any activity fully hydrated. So really drink lots of water throughout the day leading up to whatever the activity is that the child may be participating in. They should not feel even the slightest bit thirsty before starting the activity. They should feel fully hydrated. And then in terms of what to drink, water is really considered totally fine and probably the recommended drink of choice for any activity that's going to last under an hour. For children that are playing maybe some more organized sports or are going to be participating in prolonged practices or games, that's when the sports drinks do start to enter into some recommendations, considering the fact that it may not just be free water that you're losing, but electrolytes as well, depending on the length of time that the child may be sweating and losing those key elements. So after an hour of activity, you may want to introduce, in addition to water, some of the sports drinks that are available. And the child should be drinking at least every 20 minutes while they are active. So how do we make some other, precautions happen in addition to hydration? So clothing, whenever possible, should be light colored and only one layer. Sometimes children don't have the opportunity to choose what their uniform is, but whenever possible, lighter the better. If they have a completely sweat saturated shirt, having another one as a backup in a bag and replacing that once they're saturated is important so that they can continue to sweat and relieve their heat stress. Practices and games should be shortened in general to account for the level of heat index, and there should be frequent water and hydration breaks. And then children do need to be promptly moved to cooler environments the moment they might start to complain of symptoms that would be concerning, feeling even the slightest bit lightheaded, nauseated, dizzy. So with that said, what are the true warning signs that are really your red flags to absolutely stop activity and seek care? So if a child were to say that they're feeling faint or dizzy or lightheaded, if they complain of a significant headache, if they have intense thirst that, a couple swigs of water doesn't seem to do the trick, any nausea or vomiting, any difficulty breathing, or seeming like they're breathing faster than usual outside of the typical increase in respiratory rate that would happen with exercise. Any type of skin numbness or feeling like their skin is tingling can be early signs of heat exhaustion. And then muscle aches or spasms are signs of dehydration and potentially early heat-induced stress. So for any of those reasons would be recommended to have the child cease the activity, to get into a cool, shaded environment, and to hydrate themselves with water and or sports drink. If these symptoms progress, then at that point, absolutely medical care would be advised. So these are a few references similar to Dr. Carter's. There's a wonderful resource in healthychildren.org that really does cover a lot of these preventative measures in a lot of these topics. And then some of the more detailed recommendations come from the American Academy of Pediatrics policy statement. And these are just some QR codes that, depending on, whether you like to snap these or not, these would take you directly to the healthychildren.org sites that I utilize to sort of provide the information in the talk. All right, so I think we do questions at the end. So with that said, I believe I'm turning it over to Dr. Yeager to talk a bit about water safety.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dr. Rooney. Give me thumbs up if you hear me. Awesome, thank you. So I am Dr. Susan Yeager, and I'm a pediatric emergency medicine physician at our children's emergency room. We are a group of pediatricians who have additional training in emergency medicine, and we work in the children's ER to help kids at all hours of the day and all days of the year. So I'll be sharing a few slides on water safety and keeping kids safe. So the first idea really is that toddlers are curious. They are active, they're eager to explore their surroundings, and they are attracted to water. Water shines, it ripples, it splashes. It can even make things float. And, lots of children don't yet understand how dangerous water can be. And the reality is that we have brief lapses in our supervision, and that's natural. We're all busy adults. We are routinely juggling things in our lives. 1 minute we might be talking to a neighbor, chasing the dog, changing a diaper, taking a phone call. And in these brief moments every day, our children slip away. And most of the time, they're not in the pool or they're not in a pond. But that's what they do. They start to challenge their boundaries, and we get distracted. So, a pool, a pond, a lake, a stream, they just add kind of a risk to that lapse in supervision. So it's important to remember that drowning is silent. I think, movies and television make the act of drowning appear more dramatic than it really is. But, really under the water, it gets very quiet. So observation is critical. Drowning is the #1 cause of death for toddlers. So healthy toddlers outside of birth defects, it's the #1 reason that we lose our kids, unfortunately. And, while many of us may be thinking about pool safety and drowning prevention while our kids are actually swimming, the most dangerous time is when kids have an unexpected and unsupervised access to water. So, for example, there may be kids playing at a swing set in the backyard where there isn't a pool or there isn't a pond. And then while you run inside to get somebody a drink, you may find that a young child slips away to go explore a neighbor's pond. So that is the more common scenario that kids get into trouble. Those kind of unexpected, unsupervised access to water. And then, so, that's an example of how 69% of our drownings, the majority of drownings occur during non-swim times when kids and families weren't intending to be swimming. So the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends layers of protection to help keep kids safe around water. So kind of knowing that perfect supervision is impossible and that children naturally explore, we have to keep barriers between children and water to help kind of add those layers of protection. And many families will use lots of these options in combination. So some of the barriers, there's lots of examples. So pool fences with like a self-closing gate and a self-latching gate, those are probably the #1 prevention strategy that families use. Though keep in mind in different areas and in different gates, not all pool fences are created equally, and the regulations in different areas may change. So make sure you understand the gate and fence regulations for your community because they can be a little bit different. The Pennsylvania laws are pretty good about pool fences, and almost every state has a law, but there is variability. Pool alarms can be helpful. They can detect waves on the surface of the water. So, while a drowning may be very silent, sometimes there's a disruption in the surface of the water. Again, it's not a perfect tool, but it can be helpful. And then pool gate alarms and house door alarms can help kind of be another barrier for children passing through. And many of these are equipped with like a touchpad that can help an adult pass through without setting off the alarm. But then, children who can't reach the touchpad, they would set off the alarm. Another thing that can be used as a window guard. So these can be especially helpful for the side of the house, like the windows on the sides of the house that face a pool. And then pool covers, if they are done correctly, they can be really helpful too. So a pool cover should cover the entire surface of the pool so securely that a child can't slip underneath the pool cover. And then we don't want collecting water to stand on top of the pool cover, because then that can be a source of risky water collection. Those pool covers that are power operated, they tend to be the safest and the easiest to use and like the most reliably used correctly pool covers. And remember those floating solar pool covers that sort of float on the surface of the water. Sometimes we use them to kind of keep the pool water warm. Those may actually increase the risk to children because maybe a ball or a toy kind of floats out onto that, onto the cover. And then kids might think that they're also safe to walk on the pool cover, and then they go under. And those covers can be, they can cover a child too, and you might not be able to visualize a child there. So then teens are an important topic to talk about with water. They are a special group that still require supervision. While toddlers less than age 4 are most common to drown, the next age group is actually teenagers, ages 15 to 19. And even when they're good swimmers, they tend to overestimate their skills in swimming, and they may actually underestimate a dangerous situation. Substance use becomes a factor for teens in water safety. And remember, like 2/3 of students have tried alcohol by age 12th grade. These are good kids. They just scientifically haven't developed the part of the brain that helps control complex decision-making and impulse control. So, one, lapse of judgment with substance use and pools can lead into, trouble for teenagers. So a buddy is good for a teenager. We should always teach, our good swimmers not to swim alone. It's another kind of safety barrier. But a buddy for a teenager can also help them make bad choices. So teenagers still require supervision. Another thing that's really important is assigning an adult water watcher. It's important to be very clear about this role though. So adults should take turns with other adults being water watchers. So I know at my house, when there are more adults, it sometimes means there is less actual supervision of the kids. I might assume that grandma's watching the kids, and she might assume that I'm watching the kids. And then we both realize that neither of us is watching the kids. So the water watcher it's important to be very clear whose turn it is, and hold them accountable. Put down cell phones, avoid distractions, avoid alcohol. The water watcher has an important job, so make sure that they're valued. Bring the water watcher a drink of water, help support the water watcher so that the kids are safe, and then take turns. Life jackets, if they're done correctly, they can also be very useful tools. So a well-fitted life jacket that kind of meets the standards can be a good tool, particularly for lakes and rivers and the ocean. But remember, it's just another layer of protection. It can't be the only, children still require supervision even if their life jacket is on. Babies and toddlers can drown in even the smallest amount of water. So empty buckets, empty bathtubs, empty baby pools or wading pools, those can all kind of become a risk when you're not expecting them to. And then swim lessons can be another helpful layer of protection, and that is on the next slide. So learning to swim probably should be a priority for every family. It's an important life skill, and it can play an important role for drowning protection. The challenge, I think, for kids is choosing the right time to start swim lessons. There's a lot of data that swim lessons in older kids prevents drowning, but there's less data in the little baby and toddler classes. There are lots of parent and toddler classes available, and they absolutely have their role, and they are super beneficial to families. They can start to introduce the concepts of water safety and build habits for swim readiness. So if your child seems ready and they're in this like less than age 4 group, they could certainly start swim lessons and they'll love it. You'll love it. It's a fun, you know, family activity to have babies and toddlers swimming with their parents in that sort of touch supervision in those classes. And then really the AAP recommends at age 4 that kids start taking swim lessons. So at this age is when there's more data to support that these swim lessons are actually, you know, vital to develop skills to be good swimmers, safe swimmers as they grow up. So usually by age 5 or 6, children can actually master the front crawl and do quite well. Again, swim lessons are just a tool. They certainly, you know, don't make kids drown proof, but another layer of protection that might help prevent drowning. And then what else can we do? I think, you know, the bottom line is just be ready. Know the environment where your kids are. Learn about your neighborhood, the pools, the ponds, the streams, the lakes, but also understand the risks at grandma's house and the babysitter's house and the friends' houses. Know that vacations and family trips can be a particularly risky time for water safety. So it's a new environment for adults. It's a new environment for children. There might be additional distractions. Families are out of their routines. So, you know the environment where you are, kind of be aware, even, you know, again, non-swimming times, when you first get to the hotel, when you first arrive at the, you know, the rental beach house, really think about those risks and what layers you can set up even on vacation to help prevent kids from drowning. Learn CPR. So parents, teenagers, caregivers, grandparents, we can all be lifesavers for our own kids, for our neighbors' kids. CPR is a vital skill. I think another, you know, coming from the ER doctor, but CPR is another kind of vital life lesson that we can all be, you know, another important layer to help drowning victims. And then our Lehigh Valley Health Network offers CPR classes, and you can register at the website lvhn.org, Raising a Family. There's lots of CPR classes available in our community, so now is a great time to learn. And I think that's all I have. My references are also from healthychildren.org. There's also some barrier guidelines for residential pools. So that's a nice resource there to help prevent child drownings from in pools if you own one. So now I think is when we can answer questions. Thanks so much for attending our webinar. It's great to review these things. Even for me, it's nice. You know, I was reminding my husband these things too as we chase around our kids this summer.
Yes, thank you all. And for anyone in attendance, you are welcome to type in your questions in the Q&A. We will be happy to answer them. And thank you to our panelists for giving such a great overview of this. You all gave such important information and new things that I've even learned myself, such as the percentage on the bug spray relates to how much time it lasts, the stuff about sports drink, when that's important, and all of that new stuff about the pool alarms and the fancy new covers. I didn't even know those exist, so that's great information. So it doesn't seem like we have any questions, but if anyone who watches this recording has any, feel free to send us emails and we will be more than happy to answer them electronically. So thank you everyone for joining, and thanks to our panelists. Have a good evening.